Welcome to the Bringing the Human Back to Human Resources podcast, the podcast all about the delicate balance between people and business, and quite literally, reconnecting the two. My name is Tracy Rubin, and I've spent nearly my entire professional career in HR. Join me as I share stories, opinions, and words of advice with you each week. Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. Thank you so much for being here for another week. This is the last episode of 2022. We made it to the end. I can't believe it. And there's so much to celebrate. And I do want to take the first few moments of this podcast to just say thank you. I mean, I know I say it as often as possible, and you might be tired of hearing me say this, but it is not lost on me that I started this podcast back in 2020, basically just over 2 years ago. And this is the second, I'm going on to the third year, the third season, whatever you want to say, even though I don't see this as seasonal. But it's just, I don't know how to reflect on this appropriately, but I'll get messages from people that I know, who I've worked with, or my family, and they make mention that they think it's amazing, and that I can't believe it's been over 2 years, and I can't either. I mean, it's just really cool, and I try to always express gratitude and kind of take stock of everything in my life and what's going on and what I'm grateful for, because there is so much to be grateful for. And I just didn't want to go into this episode without starting there, because none of this would be possible if it weren't for all of you. Anyone tuning in, listening, it doesn't matter whether you're listening the moment this episode launches and is published, or if you're listening 2 years later. Who knows where I'll be in 2 years from now with the podcast, but this podcast has reinvigorated my spirit for HR and has reminded me of the things that I love and the things that I need to learn more about, and the way that we all can contribute to one another's experience. So, in this world, I should say. So, thank you again. Thank you so much. And I'm really looking forward to 2023. I have something, I can't talk about it yet, but I'm so excited for it. And I think that it will become a reality in January. So, you'll hear more about it then. Hopefully, if everything works out. But I'm just super, super excited, because I think it is. I'm not trying to do this whole like dangle the carrot in front of your face thing. I just am still in the planning of it all and trying to work through the logistics. But basically, it would be something that hopefully gives back to all of you in a very real way, or for whoever it's applicable to. So that's all I can say. I'm trying to keep the excitement alive. So, for this week's episode, I'm going to keep it short and sweet, but there are a couple things that I want to touch on that are kind of taking front and center stage for business and all of us as well. And there are some things that I've seen on LinkedIn too that I kind of want to address, because I am working on getting these thought leaders on the podcast so that we can talk to them directly. But in the meantime, I want to share my opinion about some of these things. So the first is AI. There is a website called OpenAI, or ChatGPT. I think it's like beta.openai.com, and it has taken the world by storm. Now, I know that this might not sound like an HR thing, but for those of you who know me personally, you probably know that my nickname in most of my jobs was Techie Trey. And I know that that sounds really corny, but that is because I have a love for things like new technology, innovations, and things that we really can get excited about. And I'm pretty good at it. I managed to obviously throw this podcast together with just a mic back in the day. So when my husband told me about this Chat GPT system, I don't really know what to call it, because I don't know that it's a company, it's a tool, maybe let's call it a tool. And basically that everyone was finding this tool like being helpful to them, because it essentially uses machine learning to craft solutions. And at risk of sounding like really nerdy, this is going to change the world, I think. Think about like a project, an HR project that you are stuck on, that you're working on. And I realize not all of you might, or some of you might not know what machine learning is, but I trust that most of you do, because I think AI and machine learning have um, kind of taken the world by storm in the last decade, probably. If you even watch Jeopardy, IBM Watson was like an example of how we can use machine learning to uh, kind of like do work for us and think for us, and automate things that otherwise would take a long time. Like learning all of that information, retaining all of that information for a human takes a lot more energy than for a computer. Anyway, I digress. Think about an HR project that you are like totally stuck on, that you maybe have procrastinated, that you're not getting the creative juices flowing for. Maybe it's creating competencies, maybe it's creating a job description. ChatGPT is essentially the playground, at least, is essentially a an open text space on the website where you can ask it questions, you can ask it to do things for you. Like I could say, please draft an email to this person about subscribing to my podcast, right? And it will draft the email. And basically, if you know anything about AI or machine learning, it takes millions, hundreds of thousands, millions of data points and creates and automates solutions. Now, I guess the other way that I could describe it is machine learning also learns on itself. So, and I am not a technical expert, so I'm really approaching this from a layman's terms perspective and in a very colloquial way. But basically, as the computer or the machine learning continues to learn, it can continue to improve. So if the email is drafted and maybe it's a little lackluster, I can say, please draft an email with 50 words that explains the blah, 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 right? And like kind of expand on the search terms. And it is taking all of this data, which of course is readily available online and in books and things like that. But as a human being, I can't go through all of that information to be able to kind of categorically put things together in 5 seconds like a computer can. And then it can continue to improve the results and the solutions that it's providing me as I ask that question. So, the way that I have used ChatGPT in the last week or so is by challenging even the AI to come up with more creative solutions than what I could come up with. So, for example, with a job description or job competencies, it takes a lot of energy to think about creating that and crafting that. And for me on the podcast side, I'm looking to kind of bring on some support. And so in doing that, I've had to write a job description. But I am not a technical expert in some of the jobs that I potentially require and needing filled for the podcast, like video editing, for example. And the job description is something that ChatGPT or AI was able to help me create. And I could change it around. Obviously, I can edit it. There's a lot of questions around, like, well, is there plagiarizing involved? Is there a copyright issue involved? But the thing is, what AI is doing is creating its own unique result, as far as I'm aware. I'm sure that we'll continue to see more information as this specific technology continues to improve, because companies all over the place use AI. I mean, AI is used everywhere pretty much at this point. And this, I think, what's unique about ChatGPT is that it's a literal like playground. They call it a playground, and it's a full open text box, so you can add and question and look up things. It is up until 2021. So, like, for example, if you ask it what is the top news in the United States today, it's going to be based on all of the information that it's gathered up until 2021. So it might not be historically accurate to the minute at this point, but I think that will be the continued growing of this technology. And it has, I mean, for me, it has totally changed the way that I work and think, because if ever I'm stuck on something, I kind of like put the question to AI and it helps me come up with different solutions. It helps me think differently. And, I started to talk about this with family members of mine and friends. And a lot of them said, like, well, technology is going to ruin the world. Like, this is going to ruin the world. This is, all of our jobs are going to be replaced. Now, let's not get ahead of ourselves. You can mark my words that I do not believe that. I have said it a million times on this podcast that technology will not replace jobs that require human touch, right? And at the end of the day, technology needs to be managed by someone. Unless there is some sort of technology out there where a computer can manage a computer with empathy and consideration and all of those things, there's still going to need to be a human involved, right? Like, I could never see HR being fully replaced by technology. Now, obviously, when we think of robots, that is like the highest level of what we think as like job replacement, right? And AI, a lot of people now are saying, oh my gosh, well, can this replace my job in sales? Can this replace my job in secretarial work? And, maybe there are certain things that AI can take over, but the way I see it is that AI and technology like this actually helps to elevate the role and the scope of the work that you do. It's not to replace it, it's to help you relieve yourself of the responsibility of work that takes so much more energy and is maybe not a huge time invest or value investment, and more so just such a huge investment of time, that now you have that freed up. Like, if I am spending all of my time crafting emails, I'm wasting my time, right? If I'm spending all of my time crafting job descriptions rather than reviewing them and checking for inclusivity and looking at that language, then I'm wasting my time. There are certain projects that we all can look at and say, that's busy work, or that is a waste of my time. It's taking up more time that I could be spending doing other things. So I really, really, really believe that belief that technology or AI is going to take over and ruin the world or replace our jobs, I do not agree with that. The other thing that I like to say to these family members and friends who have shared their feelings around technology is that technology is the reason why we're all doing what we do today. I'm podcasting thanks to advancements in technology. I'm able to work remotely with people across the world thanks to advancements in technology. We all are able to get to and from a grocery store by car or by train or by bus thanks to advancement in technology. Even beyond that, we all were able to see the COVID pandemic mitigated thanks to vaccinations because of advancement in technology. So when we think about that differently, that how the way that technology can actually help us, I think we're going to allow our minds to open up a little bit more. And I think this mindset, right? This like super binary black and white, this is going to ruin the world or this is going to help the world, is part of the problem that we face in HR. We're either good HR people or we're bad HR people. We're helpful, we're unhelpful. We are the police and we ruin the party, or we're the fun of the party and we're not professional, right? Like, it's just so binary. But what we know about HR is that there is nothing black and white about what we do. Everything is gray and gray matter. So being able to reconcile that gray area is important for us to kind of feel comfortable in across our lives, in all areas of our lives. It will allow us to have better judgment, right? And like to be more discerning and just look at life a little bit more fluidly, and not so, it either is or it isn't. And I think like the better we do at that, the better we'll be in business too, because things aren't black and white anywhere. There is no like harsh line in the sand. So all I can say is this technology has made my job a lot easier. It has improved my podcasting abilities because I'm able to like create things and draft things and understand things through an unbiased lens because, like, I'm not looking up like news articles based on, you know, different like political spectrums, right? Like I'm typing into ChatGPT a question and it's looking at everything and giving me an answer. And I love that. I love that it's not like, well, this is what one person says and this is what another person says. It takes like the underlying information and provides that to me. So I'm here for that. So, the other thing that I wanted to talk about is something I've been seeing passed around, talked about on LinkedIn, which is this, I guess, like belief that HR needs to do better when it comes to like all of these layoffs, and that all of these layoffs that we're seeing, especially across big tech, are a result of HR's lack of planning. Um, I believe that this initial thought was shared by an HR person who is like super, super, super big and like a big name in HR, thought leadership, etc. And I humbly disagree. I think this is again like the black and white, right? This is why I set up the episode to talk about how we view the world because things cannot be boiled down to they did this right or they did this wrong. You are right, you are wrong. You should have done better. You did great. Like there's so much that happens in between those end results. And, when I think about that, when I reflect on these layoffs, and there have been many, hundreds of thousands actually across the world, from many businesses, and it continues. We continue to see this, especially in companies like technology, which tend to have rapid growth and then sometimes decelerate, and then they accelerate and they decelerate, and there's like a lot of that, like intense, like growing up, growing down. And I can understand the initial perspective that, well, maybe there's a planning issue. HR should have planned better. But how many times can I say it is not just HR that is involved in these decisions, that's involved in this type of planning? In some cases, in startup companies especially, sometimes they don't even have HR. So who are we going to blame then, right? And this is the thing. We can't blame anyone. There is so much that comes or that leads to a layoff. In this case, we have micro and macroeconomic changes and impact. We have inflation, which is included in that, even from trade and international business, like we're seeing changes there. And all of those things impact businesses at a detailed level and at an organizational level. Like there are so many factors that lend to a business's ability to continue to operate at the level at which they're operating. And sometimes there's like too much growth, and this is I again, I can understand that this could be a reflection of poor planning, but sometimes the growth is anticipated to be bigger and then things happen. The pandemic is a perfect example where everything changed. Business had to completely shift. We basically had to put the car in park and then reverse. Like there was so much that shifted business. Obviously, that impacted supply chain. Now, supply chains are, and the supply chain issues are impacting retailers today in Q4 of 2022, 2 years after, actually almost 3 years after COVID first impacted the United States to our knowledge, right? So this is not just a 6 months ago, HR did a poor job planning, and now this is where we are. We have to be able to look at things much more holistically than that. And are there instances where HR potentially planned improperly, or business leaders, I should say, more globally speaking, planned improperly or inaccurately? For sure. We are human beings, we make mistakes. But at some level, you can't blame tens of thousands of layoffs on poor planning. There is obviously more to the story than planning if 10,000 people in one company have been laid off, right? Like, this is, to me, that is a common sense understanding. Now, if I can get these thought leaders on the podcast, I want to have this conversation with them because maybe there's something I'm missing. Maybe there's an understanding that I haven't kind of considered yet. But I just think it's so short sighted to just say, this is one person's fault. This is HR's fault. This is the business's fault. But even more so, like, you can't blame HR. There is no organization on this planet where a decision maker is making a decision on their own, unless maybe they're a one person business like me running a podcast. Like, it's just not happening. If there is an HR department and there is a decision maker in HR at some level, there are levels. There might be a board involved, right? Like, there's so many things that lead to the final stamp of approval. This is what we're going to do from a labor planning and succession planning perspective. Like, there is just no reality where HR says this is what we're going to do and that's what's being done. There is and there's no reality where finance is saying this is what we're going to do and that's going to be done. It's just not the way business works. At least, again, generally speaking, if you have more than one employee in the company or in the organization, like, it's just not happening. So we have to do a better job, in my opinion, of challenging the status quo, asking questions, and challenging each other too. There is no value in agreeing with everyone, or not doing your own research, or not kind of questioning what is being discussed. So when I saw that kind of going around on LinkedIn, I didn't want to jump into the conversation in that way, because I do think, I've spent 20 minutes now kind of talking about how things are not black and white and there's so much nuance. So, how can you capture that in a comment without droning on and on and on? You just can't. So, my goal is to actually just bring on those folks to the podcast so we can just hash it out and talk about it. And we'll see. Hopefully I can get in touch with their people. We'll see. But at any rate, I definitely hope that you walk away from this episode going into the new year thinking differently. This is what the ethos of this podcast kind of talks about, that there is so much nuance. There's so much that we can question and challenge and bring a different perspective to. And that's where value is added. So, with that, I just want to again say thank you so much for making 2022 one of the probably the best year for the podcast yet. And I'm so excited to see you back here in 2023 for the very first Tuesday of the year. I will see you back here then. And I'm really excited for what we have in store in 2023. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you're listening to this podcast, wherever you're watching the video. Share it with a friend, and make sure that you press subscribe or follow wherever you're catching this, because then when the newest or the first episode of 2023 comes out, you will be the first to know. Thank you so much again. Have a wonderful and happy holiday season with your friends, family, and everything and everyone in between. And I hope that you have a wonderful end to the year. Happy New Year, happy holidays, and I will see you in 2023.